Howdy folks, hope you're doing great. The other day I had a conversation with a fellow and he had an interesting take. It comes from lies from Gnosticism, ultimately. Whether or not this individual realises this is where he's gotten his ideas from, that's the source of his ideas. Okay. It's an interesting idea, you don't hear as often, alright, unless you're in Gnostic circles. Right? Now, essentially, he was opposed to Jesus, okay? He's opposed to Jesus being God, and the Bible, the Father, God the Father, Christianity in general, and his reason is that Jesus, claiming he feels and believes that, which is ridiculous, really, that, and I'll explain why in a moment. He feels that because Jesus claims to be King of Heaven, Jesus boldly claims, and that's what he was put to death for. Okay, so at least he's not arguing like the people out there, like the New Agers, that they try to argue like, oh, Jesus is just the Christ. It's just Christ consciousness. And we can actually show, there's evidence to show where that idea first originated. Okay? The idea of Christ consciousness has only been around in the recent modern era. It's a new modern idea. Okay? Comes from a bunch of hippies and stuff that are actually open, self-proclaimed Satan worshippers. Okay? So, that's not my idea, that's not my opinion. You can research it yourself, look it up, Google it yourself. Where does the actual term Christ consciousness come from? Who invented the idea Christ consciousness? And you realise it comes from a Satan worshipper. Like, come on, man. I'm doing like, somebody's like raping children and like doing human sacrifices and like killing babies and children and drinking their blood and shit. Like full psycho, pedophile, fucking rapist, you know, like, yeah, the worship Satan. That's where the idea of Christ consciousness comes from. Probably not a good idea. If that's where it comes from, right? Yeah, you should just throw it in the bin, because just that in itself. You don't even need to break the idea down and understand why it's wrong or why the idea is evil. You just need to realise, well, Christ consciousness was invented just recently, in like the past 100 years, by a Satan worshipping, child raping, blood drinking, pedophile demon, essentially. Okay? So that should be enough for any sane, normal thinking person that like, whoa, really? That's where the idea of Christ consciousness comes from? Well, fuck that, I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want nothing to do with that weird pedophile, child murdering, fucking blood drinking, weird satanic shit, man. Fuck that. So every normal person from that should just throw Christ consciousness in the bin, if they're fucking sensible. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you, knowing that, okay? But you get the New Agers that think that Christ consciousness is a legitimate thing, and they think that they just never read their Bibles. They were never raised in church or anything, so they don't know actually what the Bible says or what Jesus says. And so they just believe and think that, oh, Jesus said that Jesus never said he's God. Jesus was just a ascended master guru, blah, blah, blah. You know, and they believe in Christ consciousness and that we can all have Christ consciousness and we can all be like Jesus, basically, which is the same lie from the Garden of Eden. If you eat this fruit that God told you not to eat, God said this is one thing you're not allowed to do. Eat this fruit. You're not allowed to try to have Christ consciousness. Okay? The one thing from the Garden of Eden. And now it's being sold again, and people are buying it up and thinking like, oh yeah, it's a great thing. When it doesn't even make sense. It's a complete lie. And then you've got the folk who take the more Gnostic angle, okay, less New Agey, like airy-fairy, and the more solidified Gnostic angle, which eventually, that's where they want all the New Age people to go eventually. They want them to eventually realise, like, oh, I was wrong about Christ consciousness. It's just made up, like, it's silly, it's fucking stupid. And then they want people to take the Gnostic angle, which is, and read the actual Bible, or find out what Jesus actually said, that there is no Christ consciousness. That's what Jesus said himself. That's called Antichrist, which is of the devil. Okay? That's what Jesus literally calls Christ consciousness. It's explained. Jesus explains it. He calls it Antichrist spirit, and it's from Satan. Okay? And then, so if you actually read the Bible, you'll find that out. And then you'll find out also Jesus clearly says that he is God. He claims that he is God. And he's put to death for it. Okay? Now, if you only read the New Testament, you might not understand that. You might not be able to interpret and actually understand what Jesus is saying, so you can be tricked. This is how people are tricked into the New Age Christ consciousness satanic idea that literally comes from a pedophile Satan worshipper. Okay? They just ignore the Old Testament, only read the New Testament, and then they misinterpret what Jesus is saying. But if you actually just read little bits of the Old Testament, and then you look at what Jesus is saying, you can't deny that he is definitely claiming to be God himself. Okay? It's like, if you just use modern English and only read the New Testament and you have a bunch of wrong ideas, it doesn't really kind of... It's like, is he really claiming to be God, or is Jesus just saying he's the Son of God? Like, and does that mean he's an enlightened ascended master or a prophet, or what does it even mean? And like, and you can like not understand it. But when you actually read the Old Testament and you understand the old Greek, the old Hebrew, old Jewish tradition, okay, that reinforce, like how we have sayings and different things that like in, you know, you have cultural slang and sayings that you say somewhere else, or a foreigner hears you saying something and it makes no sense. They don't know what you're saying because it's slang, okay? So you have to actually know all the old Jewish slang from the ancient biblical times and how they used their language and the metaphors and what things meant, okay, culturally at the time, and the translation of the ancient Hebrew and Greek. And you got to read the Old Testament so you know what means what. So you can actually then read what Jesus says and be like, oh, when Jesus says he's claiming to be the Son of God, this is what he's saying. This is what he means. This is what the cultural slang is. This is like, you can actually know what he's saying. And then you'll know 100%, without a doubt, there's no question in the matter whatsoever, that Jesus is definitely claiming to be God himself. And the Pharisees knew it. That's why they got so angry. You know, they understood their own cultural slang and what a saying means in their own language and their own culture at the time that they lived, like any normal person does. So the Pharisees knew instantly, because their whole culture was the Old Testament and all these things I just mentioned. That's ingrained into them even genetically at the time. And they were raised on that. It was a culture that was passed down generation by generation by generation. And so they were rooted in that understanding at the time. Alright? So they couldn't misinterpret what Jesus was saying. So when Jesus said what he said, they knew he was claiming to be God himself. Okay? So, with all that said, this individual, he has this Gnostic perspective, okay, that he understands all of what I just explained. Yes, Jesus did definitely claim to be God. He's not just claiming to be some guru or this or that. There's no argument in the matter. Jesus 100% claimed he was God, and that is why the Pharisees were angry. That is why he was put to death. Okay? This individual understands that, but he doesn't believe that Jesus is God. So, his perspective and the Gnostic perspective, okay, so this is where he gets the idea, whether he realizes it or not. It's not his own idea, he's not clever, he hasn't thought of it himself, no one has. It's from the Gnostics. And it's the idea that actually Jesus is bad because he's trying to claim that he's God and that this is his kingdom and he wants to dominate and have authority, so he's bad and he has rules and like he'll punish you and he'll send you to hell. And so Jesus is actually the bad guy and Satan, Lucifer, is actually the good guy, they say. And he was just trying to help us when he tricked us into eating the fruit. When we had paradise. When everything was perfect and we had paradise and there was nothing to ever worry about. Apparently, Lucifer was just trying to trick us. I mean, help us, sorry. He wasn't tricking us, they say, the Gnostics. So this individual believes that Satan, Lucifer, he wasn't actually trying to trick us and destroy us, and that's why we fell from paradise where everything was perfect, and now look at the world, it's fucked because it's run by Lucifer. No. It's actually, somehow this helped us. Somehow Satan helped, this was help, because now we have consciousness and you can have a fucking Kundalini awakening. If you pay enough to a good enough yoga instructor. Like, if you fork out enough money, you can have like Kundalini awakening, and so like now all the fucking child sacrifice and the death and the, of innocence and the injustice and the suffering and sexual abuse and child trafficking and slave trade and the fucking evils of the world and the wars that are happening, the genocides happening in the world right now and the wars, all of it's perfectly great. Thanks, Satan. Thanks, Lucifer. Thanks, you helped us so much, because Jesus is bad and evil, they reckon. And he was trying to keep us trapped. Jesus wanted to keep us trapped in paradise, where everything was perfect and no one ever suffered, and there was no death and no sickness, and everyone was full of joy and peace and bliss, and everything was just fucking perfect paradise. Jesus was evil, and God's evil for trying to keep us trapped in his kingdom. Lucifer is the actual good guy, they say, because he freed us from that prison of paradise, so that we could live in this fucking shithole and all suffer and die, and watch people suffer and die around us. Thanks, Satan, you dog, you fucking scumbag. Like, but for some reason they think this is good, this world, okay? The only way they can think that is they mustn't believe in paradise. They mustn't have any understanding of heaven, or how the universe is actually supposed to be. They can't comprehend how good and perfect existence is actually supposed to be. So they think that this existence is like tolerable or acceptable or even good. Where there's like children being fucking raped and pedophiles getting around running the world and shit. Somehow this is good. Because they can't think of anything better. But there actually is a lot better. It's called paradise. It's called heaven. And it's actually perfect. And there's no suffering whatsoever. No wickedness, no evil, no suffering at all. Just perfect good. Joy, peace, love, understanding, wisdom, harmony, tranquility. And that's how existence is supposed to be. And yes, that is the trap or the prison, oh no, that Jesus and God put us in and wanted to keep us in. Oh no, how bad of God. Like a loving parent wanting to keep their child in a safe environment. Oh, you should just let them go run around on the highway. How dare you trap and imprison your children in a safe environment where they have perfect joy and perfect peace. and everything's just good and perfect and right. How dare you, Jesus? How dare you, God? They say. We should just they want to let the children out. They want to sneak in like Satan and free your children and let them run around in the wilderness and in the fucking clubs and in trap houses and around pedophiles and on highways so that your children have freedom. Because how dare you as a loving parent try to imprison and trap your loved one, your child, to keep them safe? Oh, you're so evil, Jesus. You're so evil, God. This is honestly what the Gnostics believe. This is honestly what old mate tried to tell me the other day. I had a conversation with a fellow 2 days ago, and this is what he tried to tell me. And that he doesn't like Jesus or Christianity because Jesus wants to be king of the universe and rule over us and punish us and reward us like a good father would, like a loving parent. How dare our Creator be a loving parent? What? The only thing I can think is these Gnostics must have something weird going on in their closet that they're not telling anyone about. That's the only thing I can assume. Why do they not like their loving parent? Or maybe because they know they're going to be punished. Maybe they know they're doing things that deserve to be punished by a loving parent. So all it says really doesn't say anything about God, doesn't say anything about Jesus. It just says something about them. In the same way, if a child's complaining that their parent rewards them when they're good, but then disciplines them and punishes them when they're bad, and they don't like that their parents punish them when they're bad, their parents are fucking evil, alright? Then you know their parents are good parents, okay? And the child is a bad child. And that's why they're complaining about their parents punishing them. Because they're being bad and they deserve to be punished. And they don't want to be punished because they're shit cunts. That's all it comes down to, really. And the only other thing that you could possibly be would be, why does Jesus get to say that he's God and claim to be God and claim the kingdom and all this stuff? Who does he think he is? And the only other way you can think is if you just think that he's not God. And then that just means you're arrogant. And if you can honestly try to be well, Jesus isn't God. What the fuck, bro? You think you're God? That's so fucking prideful. So arrogant, cunt, to try to make out that Jesus isn't God, cunt. Who the fuck are you, bro? To say that Jesus isn't God, cunt. What the fuck? You're not God, bro. Only God can say who's God, bro. So if Jesus is God, he can say that he's God, bro, because he's God. But you can't say he's not. Because you're not fucking God, bro. You can't. Only God can say who is not God. Who is and who is not. So if you're trying to say Jesus is not God, you're literally claiming to be God yourself. To have that knowledge. How the fuck would you know if Jesus is God or not, bruss, unless you're God to know, cunt? Obviously, you have to be God to know if somebody actually is God or not God. Only God could know that. So if only God can know if Jesus is God, anyone saying that Jesus isn't God is literally claiming to be God themselves, and we all know that they definitely are not God. Sorry, bro, you're not God. If you see this video, the old mate I had a conversation with 2 days ago, sorry, bruss, you're not God, cunt, so you're wrong. Okay? You're wrong, bro. You can't say Jesus isn't God or Jesus isn't King of Heaven. Because you're not God, bro. You can't say that, bro. Only God can say that, bro. Come on. Let's be fucking normal, sensible people. Only God can say who is and who isn't God, cunt. You and me, as human beings, cannot say who is or isn't God, cunt. Only God can say that. So you can't say Jesus isn't God. But I can say Jesus is God because Jesus said he is God. And he's God. So if God says that he is God, God is allowed to say he's God. So that's Jesus saying he's God. He's allowed to because he's God. And that means that Jesus is God. So I can say Jesus is God because Jesus is God. And he said he is God. And no cunt can say he's not except for him because he's God. Like, and if anyone thinks otherwise, they're just arrogant. They're literally trying to claim to be God. So they're automatically wrong. Bye. Like, it's that simple.